Icebergs are huge pieces of freshwater ice that break off from glaciers or ice shelves and float in open water. Most icebergs form in places like Antarctica and Greenland, where massive sheets of ice stretch out into the sea. When a chunk of this ice breaks away, it becomes an iceberg. This process is called calving, and it happens naturally as the edge of a glacier moves forward and becomes unstable. And once in the ocean, icebergs start drifting. Their movement is mainly controlled by ocean currents, winds, and tides. These forces push icebergs away from their origin and can carry them hundreds or even thousands of miles. Some icebergs stay far out in the ocean and slowly melt away over time, but others take a different path. They move into shallower coastal waters, getting closer and closer to land. Not all icebergs make it that far. Many break apart or melt before reaching the coast, but the larger ones, some as tall as buildings and as wide as city blocks, can last for months or even years. These giants can eventually run into underwater ridges or shorelines. When this happens, the collision can be intense, especially if the iceberg is still mostly intact and moving with speed. The chance of an iceberg hitting land depends on where it forms and the currents it follows. Along the coasts of Canada, Greenland, and parts of Antarctica, iceberg landings are more common. In some areas, people keep a close watch on iceberg movements to avoid accidents, especially where shipping routes are nearby. When an iceberg finally reaches land, the result can be dramatic. These frozen masses, some weighing millions of tons, move slowly but with enormous force. Even at a few knots of speed, the sheer size and weight of an iceberg can cause serious impact when it meets solid ground. The collision usually starts beneath the surface, where most of the iceberg's mass is hidden underwater. Nearly 90% of an iceberg sits below the waterline, so the contact with the seabed or coastal terrain begins before anything is seen above. As the underwater base scrapes or slams into the shore or a submerged slope, the iceberg can grind to a halt. This creates a loud, deep rumbling that sometimes feels like a small earthquake. The pressure can tear away chunks of the seabed, disturb marine ecosystems, and stir up sediment that has been resting for centuries. In shallower waters, this process can even reshape parts of the coastline. Above water, the collision can cause ice to break off in large chunks. Pieces the size of trucks or houses may split and fall into the sea. This often triggers sudden waves, which can be dangerous for nearby boats or structures. In remote regions like Greenland or the Antarctic coast, these waves might go unnoticed, but in areas closer to human activity, the surges can damage docks, fishing equipment, or even buildings near the shoreline. In some cases, if the front of the iceberg is pushed upward against land, it may tilt or roll. This can create even larger waves and send ice debris flying. While rare, these rollovers are powerful and can pose a threat to ships or coastal stations monitoring ice movement. Once an iceberg is grounded, it may stay lodged in place for weeks or even months, slowly melting or breaking apart as weather conditions change. Once an iceberg has collided with land and come to a stop, the environmental changes begin to unfold over time. One of the most noticeable long-term effects is coastal erosion. As the iceberg melts, the runoff from fresh water can destabilize nearby soil and rock, slowly wearing away the land. In areas with permafrost or fragile coastal shelves, this can lead to landslides or cliff collapses over weeks or months. Another effect is the sudden change in salinity in the surrounding ocean water. Icebergs are made of fresh water, and as they melt, they release huge volumes into the saltwater environment. This can upset the balance of local marine ecosystems. Species that rely on stable salinity levels may be forced to migrate, while others might not survive the shift. In places like the North Atlantic and around Antarctica, these disruptions have been linked to changes in fish populations and plankton growth. The release of sediments is another concern. When an iceberg scrapes along the ocean floor before hitting land, it stirs up mud, sand, and ancient debris buried beneath. As the iceberg rests and melts, this material can be deposited along the shoreline, altering habitats and sometimes burying smaller ecosystems. In some regions, this process has even reshaped tidal zones and shallow bays. There's also a chain reaction in the local food web. As certain fish or crustaceans move away due to habitat loss or water changes, animals that feed on them like seabirds or seals may begin to struggle. These ripple effects can last for years, depending on the size of the iceberg and the sensitivity of the environment it impacts. Finally, iceberg collisions can influence local climate patterns. Large icebergs absorb and reflect sunlight differently than open ocean or land. When grounded near a coast, they can slightly cool the nearby area. This can delay seasonal ice melt or shift wind and weather conditions along that coast. Over the past century, there have been several recorded cases of icebergs colliding with land, especially in polar regions and remote coastal zones. One notable example occurred in the early 20th century when a large tabular iceberg broke off from Antarctica and grounded near South Georgia Island. The massive chunk of ice disrupted local wildlife, blocked ship routes, and took years to fully melt away. Events like this have helped researchers understand just how disruptive iceberg groundings can be. In recent years, the iceberg known as A68, which calved from Antarctica in 2017, gained global attention as it drifted dangerously close to South Georgia Island in 2020. Although it narrowly avoided direct landfall, its approach alone stirred international concern due to the threat it posed to fragile ecosystems and global shipping lanes. Today, scientists use satellite tracking, radar, and ocean buoys to keep a close eye on iceberg movement. Organizations like the U.S. National Ice Center and the European Space Agency monitor large icebergs in real time. These systems help predict where an iceberg might go, how fast it's moving, and whether it's likely to hit land. This kind of information is vital for researchers, coastal planners, and even fishing operations in the Arctic and Antarctic regions. Scientists also study the structure and thickness of icebergs to understand how they'll behave if they reach shallow waters or make landfall. Icebergs that have been weakened by warmer ocean currents tend to break apart more easily, reducing the chance of a dramatic impact. But with rising global temperatures, more frequent and unpredictable iceberg calving events could increase the chances of land collisions in the future. Looking ahead, climate change could make these collisions more common. As polar ice sheets continue to melt, more large icebergs are breaking away and entering shipping routes or drifting toward populated coastlines. While most melt harmlessly at sea, a small number still make contact with land, especially in places like Greenland, parts of Canada, and the southern Atlantic islands. Ultimately, iceberg collisions with land are rare but powerful events. Through technology and ongoing research, scientists hope to stay ahead of these natural forces and minimize their potential impact on both human activity and the environment.